You will meet a couple who faced incredible challenges but didn't give up. They overcame betrayals, fought for justice, and experienced the joy of becoming parents. It's a tale of love, courage, and faith in the future, showing that true strength lies in unity and mutual support. We all make mistakes of one kind or another, but the most important thing is what lessons we learn after them. My wife is on the way to making her biggest mistake in life, because of which she may lose not only me but also herself. We had an average family, 2 children, and a stable income, but at some point everything went wrong. My name is Mark Chase, and I want to start my story from when I was 18 years old and had just finished high school. Around that time, I enrolled in college like many of my peers. I probably thought of myself as quite the cool guy, dating different girls, exploring how many of them I could charm. It was a kind of test for me, would she be mine or not? Once I started college, like most guys my age, I soon realized that my thoughts were occupied not so much with studying as with the pursuit of seduction. Nevertheless, I studied enough in college to land a good job in sales. This job opened new opportunities for me, and I made sure not to miss out. I succeeded in sales, becoming one of the top sellers. I would go from house to house and apartment to apartment selling goods, but there were times when I took advantage of my position. It was a special feeling entering a home where typically a lonely woman would be dressed in something sexy or just in a robe. In those moments, I usually closed the deal quickly and then acted as what seemed natural for a young man and a lonely woman of any age. The hardest part was figuring out whether a woman was flirting with me or wanted something more. I didn't want to risk my job over a potential entanglement and subsequent dismissal. With so much going on around me, I preferred that women take the initiative. If they started talking about sex or made the first move, I was ready to reciprocate. Perhaps I missed many opportunities by acting on chance. Once, while doing some minor shopping in a mall, I encountered a delightful girl. She was petite, barely over 5 tall, with a contagious smile and an attractive figure serving me at the checkout. I decided to use my charm to persuade her to go on a date, and after the 10th visit to the store, she agreed. I truly fell in love with her and just hoped she shared my feelings. At that time, I was still working in sales and dating Ruth. We got along wonderfully, and soon our relationship moved to the next level. Yes, it was love unlike anything I had experienced before. I yearned to please not just myself but her as well. 10 months into our acquaintance, Ruth got pregnant despite using contraception. We were that one couple in 100 who faced such a surprise, and we decided to get married in the 4th month of her pregnancy. Looking back, I realized I wasn't ready for marriage. I truly loved Ruth, that's true, but I was only 20 and quite immature. I acted thoughtlessly, and after the wedding, I found myself in bed with other women simply because I could. It was nothing like what I felt with Ruth. Despite everything, I still believed in our relationship. I didn't boast about my affairs, but I think people knew anyway that I was married and soon to be a father. I understand that some might have called me a scoundrel or worse, and I deserved those judgments. I see that now, but back then it seemed like just a desire to be with any woman. I was immature and not ready for the responsibilities that marriage and fatherhood bring. One day, Ruth discovered that I hadn't been faithful to our marriage, after which she couldn't stop her tears. We spent long hours discussing what had happened, and she seriously considered divorce, which might have been the best solution for her. Nevertheless, she found the strength to forgive me, although I sincerely regretted my actions. The consequences of my infidelity were a real revelation to me. In my youth, I rarely thought about the consequences of my actions, but that changed when I saw the pain I had caused my wife. This realization literally tore me apart, and I promised never to betray her trust again. Since then, I've tried to be a better husband, and soon we had a son whom we named Jacob. We faced many difficulties, as any other family would. We had financial troubles and often argued over trivial matters, but we learned to resolve our disagreements and kept our love alive. After that incident, my love for Ruth only grew stronger, although I couldn't always show it, but she knew I was willing to do anything for her. Our closeness was truly special. A few years later, our second son David was born, and our happiness seemed boundless. We were a real family, albeit with ordinary problems and desires. I always dreamed of owning my own business to independently decide my fate. After many conversations with Ruth and despite financial difficulties, we acquired a small construction store. The business didn't make much money, but it provided enough for us to live on, and I was happy to realize my dream. Ruth struggled with her weight after the birth of our second child and often criticized herself, but I always assured her of her beauty. For me, her appearance was unimportant. I loved her for who she was. Despite my support, she rarely believed me. We often argued over her diets and attempts to lose weight. Each time these arguments ended with reminders of my past mistake, even though it was long ago and Ruth said she had forgiven me. Apparently, some wounds take a very long time to heal. My wife has always been busy raising our sons and worked part-time to be able to give them more attention when they entered middle school. Her career took off. She was offered a promotion and became the head of her department, significantly increasing her income. Then she decided to focus on herself again, started to follow a diet, and joined a women's fitness club. Although it didn't worry me, after all, it was a place exclusively for women, I couldn't help but wonder if such a decision could lead to infidelity. However, her determination and the results she began to show were comforting. She was losing weight and felt noticeably better, which without a doubt pleased me. Our marital life, like many, had its ups and downs, especially when it came to sex. After many years of marriage, it seemed that passion had become something mundane for us, and sometimes we could go months without making love. However, when it did happen, the moments were truly magical. Her job and new figure brought her joy, and I saw how much happier she had become. One day, she came home and asked if I would mind if she spent some time with friends. Of course, I had nothing against it, as I hadn't seen them in many years. She mentioned that they had planned a bachelorette party for Saturday and wanted to make sure I was okay with it. It seemed strange to me, and I felt something was bothering her. When I asked about the problem, she answered that she might be experiencing menopause symptoms affecting her mood. I hugged her, assuring her of my love and support. On the day she was preparing for the party with friends, I couldn't help but notice how she froze in my arms. I realized we had problems, but solving them would have to wait for now. I decided to give her space and time. She looked beautiful in her outfit as always, and I never tired of telling her so. Before leaving, she informed me where she was going and that her friend Pam would pick her up. Left alone, I realized I needed to learn more about what was happening with her and how we could overcome our problems together. I never wanted to spy on her. My trust in her was boundless. But observing her behavior, I couldn't help but notice that something had changed. It was important for me to understand the reasons for these changes, especially when Ruth and her friends started visiting a huge dance club where it's easy to get lost in the crowd. Going there, I chose a spot on the second floor balcony, which offered a view of the entire hall. From there, I could see how Ruth and her friends, settling into cozy semicircular booths, were having a good time. Maybe I was wrong in my suspicions. Ordering a drink, I simply observed her regretting my presence here, but I needed to be sure of her well-being. Ruth's friends were diverse. Among them were both married and single women, as well as divorced ones. Most of them I had met once or twice, but there were also those whom I was seeing for the first time, presumably acquaintances from the gym. About half an hour later, a few men approached their table, offering the ladies to dance. Ruth initially refused, but after a couple of cocktails, she agreed. I didn't see anything alarming in this. However, I was concerned about a potential problem she might encounter as time went on. She increasingly stayed on the dance floor. Among men I didn't know, possibly were colleagues or just strangers wanting to have a good time. I decided to stay a bit longer to see what would happen next. I watched as she began to slowly dance with one guy who embraced her and allowed his hands to slide onto her buttocks, pulling her closer to himself. She reacted by pushing his hands away, but he persisted and tried again. Eventually, when he grabbed her once more, she left his hand in place for a short while before pushing him away again. Then his hand moved to her chest, where it lingered for a few seconds before she pushed him away again. This greatly concerned me, and I wondered whether I should intervene or say something. I was sure she was unaware of my presence and pondered whether such behavior was normal for her or if she simply didn't want to cause a scene. At the end of the song, she returned to her friends, and I was too far away to make out their conversation, though some of the girls seemed cheerful or were smiling. Minutes later, they finished their drinks and began to gather to leave. The guy she danced with approached her to say goodbye and kissed her lightly. This made me wonder if I had seen more in their interaction than there actually was. I quickly got up and, passing through the back door, headed to my car to go home. At home, the boys were already watching TV. I nodded to them in greeting and went to prepare something to drink, feeling the smell of alcohol, which seemed to me a fitting end to the evening. 10 minutes after my arrival home, Ruth also arrived. I greeted her and asked how her evening was. She replied that it was fine, though she seemed a bit tense. Looking into her eyes, I said, "Ruth, we need to talk." I knew that Ruth never lied to me. She might have her secrets like all of us, but I had never caught her in an outright lie. I noticed tears hiding in the corners of her eyes. She looked at me, barely holding back her emotions, and said, "Mark, I have a problem and I don't know how to solve it." Her voice trembled and she started to cry. I gently hugged her, trying to comfort her, and asked if it had anything to do with her bachelorette party. She ambiguously replied, "Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Let's sit down, we need to talk." My heart tightened with a premonition of trouble. "Ruth, tell me what happened tonight. Why are you so upset?" I insisted, wanting to understand the cause of her sorrow. She began her story about how she and her friends went to a club where they started drinking and dancing. One guy started touching me insistently, and I I didn't stop him right away, she admitted with difficulty. My bafflement turned into shock when Ruth confessed that she liked the attention from men and that this feeling had been tormenting her for several months. She was seeking support in me, but I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Ruth, is this infidelity? Were you with someone else?" I asked, feeling my heart tear apart. Through tears, she replied that she had never physically cheated on me, but confessed that she had allowed men to touch her. This revelation shattered my perception of our marriage. Ruth pleaded with me not to leave, saying she loved me. But I realized we both needed time to sort out our feelings and desires. I suggested we should live apart for a while. She would stay at home with our sons, and I would move into an apartment above my shop. These 2 months were to be a trial for both of us, a time when Ruth needed to decide what she truly wanted from life and our relationship. I made it clear that if she chose the path of freedom and new relationships, I would immediately file for divorce. It was the hardest decision of my life, but I understood that love and trust were essential for our relationship to survive. I began my conversation with our sons the next morning, inviting them to the living room. It seemed they had caught snippets of last night's conversation from their rooms, and as they sat down, I opened my heart to them. I explained that their mom and I were facing some family difficulties, which meant I would have to live above the shop for a while until we resolved our issues. I emphasized that none of this was their fault, and that it was a matter between their mom and me. Ruth, standing behind them, couldn't hold back her tears, but chose to remain silent. I assured them that we both loved them very much and that they could turn to us at any time. I promised to attend their school events and assured them that nothing would change for them except my absence from home. I assured them that no matter what happens in the future, they would always have a roof over their heads and should not worry about moving or losing friends. They wanted to know more, but I explained that this was all I could share for now. I confessed that their mother and I were facing serious issues that needed to be resolved, and we would see how things would unfold over the next 2 months. After they helped me move my personal belongings into the apartment above the store, I asked them to support their mother in any way they could, as she needed their love if we were to keep the family together. I advised them not to ask her too many questions about the separation and to help around the house. I knew they were good boys and would do their best. I was only a mile away from them, ready to help if needed. Ruth needed time to sort through the situation. I was full of doubts myself, afraid of losing her. My life felt like hell now. It all depended on Ruth. I had to overcome serious problems. I had a wife whom I trusted more than anyone in the world, knowing she had never betrayed me and always supported our marriage by telling me the truth. But her latest revelation could be the end of our marriage. I loved her more than anything and did not want to lose her. I was not weak and was ready to fight for her, but I did not know where to start. This decision became the most important in her life, to choose the affair or save our marriage. But if she loved me, she wouldn't need to choose. Having moved into my new apartment above the store, I felt acute pain and loneliness. Thoughts of Ruth tormented me. Trying to give her space and time to think, I drowned myself in work, spending every free minute in the store to distract myself. The business was picking up, and I found myself overwhelmed with paperwork, which I hated even though sales were enjoyable. I realized I couldn't manage on my own. I decided to hire an office worker and placed an ad in the newspaper. My son supported me, helping in the store every couple of days. Their visits were not just assistance with the business, but also a bridge to the past. They told me how their mother was coping with my absence, that she cried a lot and felt depressed. Learning that Ruth had made a doctor's appointment, I realized how deep her pain was. One day, Pam, a longtime friend of Ruth and an acquaintance of mine, walked into the office. She was closer to Ruth than anyone and candidly expressed her thoughts on my actions. Her words were harsh. She called me a fool for leaving Ruth at such a difficult time instead of supporting and protecting her. According to Pam, Ruth needed me more than ever, and I betrayed her by leaving her alone with her problems. This conversation made me reconsider my actions. I began to see the situation from a different angle, realizing that perhaps I had rushed into the decision to give Ruth time and space instead of being there and helping her through the difficulties. Deep down, I began to understand that love and support might have been the best medicine for her. I've always considered myself a person who acts rightly, but a recent conversation with Pam made me doubt my beliefs. I will always be there for you, I promised Ruth before leaving, I said. However, the realization came too late. Pam was right. I acted foolishly. Addressing Pam, I confessed my confusion. What should I do? I'm lost. How can I help her? My love for Ruth was very strong, and Pam, her best friend, knew it better than anyone. Didn't you see the warning signs in advance? She asked me. We both knew that Ruth was struggling, as she had been sharing her concerns with me for several months. Perhaps changes in her life or emotional fluctuations triggered by a new social circle at the gym made her see the world differently. Since Ruth started going to the gym and lost weight, she began to attract the attention of other men, which undoubtedly affected her self-esteem. Before leaving, Pam reminded me of an important meeting. You need to be at the formal on Friday at 9 p.m. Shocked, I couldn't understand what Pam meant. What's happening? I asked. She explained that there would be a business meeting on Friday at 7 p.m., which all middle managers, including my wife's company, are expected to attend. This event includes dinner and cocktails, and spouses are invited. Pam also shared alarming news. Some managers plan to get Ruth drunk and seduce her, and I won't be allowed in as I would be unable to control the situation. She emphasized that no one would be there to protect Ruth at this fancy event. Why does Ruth know about this? I asked. Yes, but she has to be there as she's part of the management, Pam replied, adding that she would keep an eye on Ruth to ensure she doesn't get into trouble. I thanked Pam for her friendship and care for Ruth, but deep down I knew at 9 p.m. On Friday, Ruth's foolish husband, who in my opinion she doesn't deserve, will protect her. That husband is me. Background on behalf of Mark's wife. I met Mark in my youth while working at a store in a shopping mall. I first saw him when he walked in and began persuading me to go on a date with him. His persistence day after day amused me until I decided to agree. His surprised look after my many refusals turned into a question, "Are you serious? Do you really want to go on a date with me?" His smile was so genuine that I couldn't refuse. As we started dating, our interaction became more intimate, and I allowed him to touch me. My feelings for Mark developed into deep love, though I tried not to show it too overtly. Over time, our relationship grew closer, and I decided to take care of contraception. However, despite taking precautions, I discovered I was pregnant. This news shocked me, and when I shared it with Mark, he disputed his initial surprise and proposed to me, answering that he would always be there for me and a child. Over the years, our life together was filled with various events. I achieved success at work, gained more independence, and even managed to lose a significant amount of weight, which did not go unnoticed by the opposite sex. However, my heart was fully devoted to Mark, and despite other women in the gym discussing their romantic adventures, I valued our deep connection and shared moments. My friend Pam proved to be a great support in difficult times, even when Mark could not understand my feelings. She suggested seeking professional help, but I hesitated, considering our family values. Pam also warned me about the potential consequences of my behavior, reminding me of the importance of preserving our vows and sincere feelings for each other. I shared with Pam that I heard from the girls at the gym that they intentionally underestimated their abilities, aiming to attract more attention. Looking at me, Pam asked, "Ruth, do you really need to attract the attention of unfamiliar men?" I realized she was right, yet the feeling of being the center of attention was pleasant. I allowed some men to touch me over my clothes, seeking to attract even more attention. A couple of months later, I promised myself that this life filled with unwanted attention and whispers from men about their desires began to tire me. I rejected them, asserting that I would never betray my husband despite his infidelity. One day, I made the mistake of confessing to a colleague that I did not intend to respond to infidelity with infidelity. Often I wondered what it would be like to be with someone else. Mark was my only love, and I couldn't compare him to anyone else, but he always cared about my feelings, being both tender and passionate. Over time, I began to experience mood swings and felt that Mark wasn't paying enough attention to me. My thoughts were often filled with wild fantasies, which scared me. I felt like I was losing my mind, unable to cope with these fantasies. Eventually, I confessed to Mark that I needed his care and warmth, which he had always provided. However, in response, he gave me an ultimatum: if I started an affair, he would file for divorce. After that, he announced he was moving, giving me 2 months to make a decision. I was devastated and didn't know where to turn. If it weren't for Pam's support in the first weeks after Mark left, I wouldn't have known what to do next. Pam had lived through her nightmare when she caught her husband with another woman. Shocked by the betrayal, she was ready for drastic measures, but they ended up divorcing. Since then, she has started dating again but has been extremely cautious. She is now seeing Ree, whose wife left him for another man 3 years ago. They seem happy together, and I sincerely hope it works out for them. Pam deserves true happiness. She is an exceptional person and a faithful friend. This week, I scheduled a consultation with a doctor, aiming to keep a clear mind for our meeting on Wednesday despite having plans for Friday. The doctor, a woman with a warm look, suggested we start our conversation with a brief discussion. I shared my experiences with her, being crying the tumultuous emotions I couldn't control. Then we moved on to more complex topics, including my husband's ultimatum regarding our sexual life and even a potential affair. She smiled and noted that I should have come to her much sooner. In her opinion, many problems could have been avoided. My doctor canceled my previous appointments and prescribed a hormonal relaxant to stabilize my emotional spikes caused by weight changes. She assured me that many medications would no longer be necessary, as they only exacerbated the internal conflict in my body. According to her, my body had just begun the maturation process, which would last many more years. She looked at me seriously, touching on the topic of my husband, and expressed regret that he does not support me as he should. She noted that she had seen many couples part ways due to misunderstandings and lack of support. From her perspective, many men pursue only superficial goals, forgetting about the depth and significance of relationships. She suggested I talk to my husband again, convinced that an honest conversation could bring us closer. At the end of our meeting, the doctor insisted that I contact her if any problems arise, otherwise she expects to see me in 2 months. Leaving, I couldn't hold back my tears, but she hugged me, assuring that everything would work out. Her words gave me hope that after getting through Friday, I could meet with Mark on Saturday and discuss everything that's happening, how much I missed him. That fateful continuation of the story on behalf of Mark. During that period of my life when Pam had laid it all out for me, I realized how greatly I had been mistaken about Ruth. I needed to talk to her, but when I tried to call, I was told she was at the doctor's. This was just the beginning of my efforts to get in touch with her. On Thursday, I finally managed to reach her at work. Ruth was happy to hear from me and suggested we meet on Saturday. I proposed Friday, but she explained she couldn't because of an important meeting that would last until late in the evening. With sadness in my voice, I confessed my love, to which she reciprocated and asked me to come on Saturday. Her voice trembled as she asked this of me, and I promised to be there without any doubt. That Thursday turned out to be a tough day for me. Nightmares kept me from sleeping. In my dream, I saw myself entering a restaurant where Ruth was sitting between 2 men, slightly intoxicated, her dress displaced, revealing part of her body. Waking up on Friday, I found the store bustling, but my thoughts were with Ruth. I tried to contact her to no avail. Her boss only informed me of her absence. Then I asked my coworker Milton to close the store for me on Saturday so I could meet with Ruth. He agreed, noting he could manage without my help on Saturday. I went to the office center only to learn Ruth wouldn't be back until Monday due to important meetings. The secretary offered to leave a message, but I decided it was better to call myself on Monday, not wanting to arouse any suspicion. Pam, whom I met at the office center, told me Ruth was excited about our upcoming meeting. According to Pam, Ruth looked stunning dressed in an elegant black mini dress and that her bosses, Edward and Ryan, were planning to offer her an intimate evening while other colleagues didn't want to interfere out of respect for Ruth as an individual. Pam warned me that the rumors about Edward and Ryan's plans could be true or false, but given their influence, few would dare to oppose them. I expressed my gratitude to Pam, highlighting her sincere friendship and support, and urged her to do the right thing. Pam confidently stated that my friend and I were like two halves of a whole, expressing hope that no one could separate us as we were both true friends to her. She added that her boyfriend R was also very special to her. Returning home, I decided to tidy up a bit and prepare for the evening at a trendy restaurant. I chose Docker pants and a sports jacket for the occasion, deciding against wearing a tie. As a hardware store owner, I always tried to look presentable but without excess. In the evening, I called my sons to discuss work matters, and they assured me of their readiness to help, especially Milton when needed. It was already 8:30 p.m., and I went to the store where Milton was arranging products on the shelves. I was proud of how well they worked, even being my sons, and dreamed that one day the store would pass into their hands, continuing the family business. Approaching Milton, I asked him for a pack of coins, and although his look was somewhat surprised, he handed them to me. After that, I headed to the restaurant where, to my surprise, I found Pam and Ree dining together. Pam smiled and noted that, although we were not in a private room, we were close enough to each other. She mentioned that many colleagues had already left and asked about Ruth, Ed, and Ryan. I saw my wife sitting with two pigs. I went outside and threw a stone at one of the cars, and one of them received a notification about the car alarm going off in Ryan's car, who then went out to check his Mercedes. At that time, Ruth, deciding it was time to make Ed pay for his actions, splashed a drink in his face. Suddenly, I burst into the room, holding a roll of coins, and struck Ed, breaking his nose with the first blow. The coins scattered in different directions, and Ed fell to the floor. When Ryan returned, he began to threaten me with a lawsuit and the seizure of my shop, but Ruth offered a better solution, producing a dictaphone. She played a recording that could change the outcome of the situation. On Monday, I planned to file a complaint for sexual harassment addressing Ryan and Ed, who were still on the floor. Ruth said, "The only reason I tolerated your advances tonight was to capture them on video. Hopefully this will help prevent your harassment of other women. See you in court." After these words, she struck Ryan in the groin, causing him to scream and fall next to Ed. I took Ruth by the hand and we headed for the exit. At the door, spectators greeted us, who began to applaud us. A young dishwasher winked and patted me on the back. We left together, holding hands. Outside the restaurant, Pam and Ree were waiting for us, smiling. Pam hugged Ruth and Ree exchanged thanks with me. Noticing the sudden noise and the triggered car alarm, we decided to stay for a moment. After Pam and Ree left, Ruth and I headed to my car. Suddenly, I realized I hadn't said a word all evening. Stopping, I looked at Ruth and said, "You look magnificent. I am the happiest man on earth to have you. Forgive me for everything." Tears sprang from her eyes as she hugged me tightly. At home, we immediately headed to the bedroom. Removing her dress, Ruth asked me, "What were you thinking? Why did you dress up so much for them?" I wondered. She replied that she dressed up for me, to show that I have something they will never have. "I love you so much." I confessed, and we hugged, laying down in bed. The following morning, upon waking up and not finding our sons, who had already gone to work, I noticed a note on the refrigerator, "Welcome home, Dad. We missed you," signed by Jacob and David. Ruth added her own note, "Me too." The rest of the weekend was wonderful. Our sons helped us with the car and brought thanks from the dishwasher, who had been watching over the vehicle. "You have wonderful parents," he told our sons before giving them a high five. Ruth and I laughed, proud of our tradition of defending each other and those we love. At dawn on Monday, I went to work, although parting with Ruth seemed unbearable. We had just begun to build new relations, and I already had to leave to catch up on missed work. At the same time, Ruth went to our lawyer to discuss evidence proving Ed and Ryan's inappropriate behavior. That evening, the lawyer confirmed that it was a typical case of sexual harassment, and since then, Ruth took leave, deciding to wait for the end of the proceedings. While Milton and I were selecting candidates for the accountant position, none of the applicants won our approval. However, returning to the office one day, Milton announced that he had found the perfect candidate. To my astonishment, he had already offered her the job without my knowledge. I was shocked by his audacity, but when Ruth appeared at the door, asserting she had all the necessary skills and could bring additional benefits, I couldn't hide my delight. A month after Ruth went back to the doctor, she received joyful news. The doctor supported her, noting significant improvement in her condition after she managed to control her hormones and relieve stress from her previous job. However, Ruth faced a new challenge: she was pregnant. Tears of joy and fear mixed when she asked me if I loved her. My support was unconditional, and together we rejoiced at the upcoming addition. 9 months of trials passed and we became parents to a wonderful girl, Pamela, who was the embodiment of her mother's beauty. Ruth is now not just an accountant, she has become a key figure in our home and business. We found happiness and confidence in the future, especially after the harassment case was settled in our favor, securing our children's future. All difficulties were left behind, and only joy and love awaited us ahead. This story of Ruth and Mark is a beautiful reminder that love and the strength of family can help overcome the toughest challenges. They demonstrate that even in difficult situations, belief in each other and readiness to support are crucial.